I started at UCL in 1991. I did my undergraduate degree and my PhD here, so I was here for a total of 6 years. It was some of the best time of my life. I literally grew up at UCL, learned lots of very practical skills. After graduating, I went to the US, ended up in Chicago, and I have been there since. I have worked 26 years now in pharmaceutical industry across 5 different companies. Being extremely scared meeting Professor Yates for the first time. I remember that having some really interesting conversations in my second year with Professor Alan Jones in deciding my research project in crystallization is something I vividly remember. And then there are some very interesting experiences with David Bogle that I remember in terms of working in a team when we were doing our design projects. Some of those are a little embarrassing, so I'm not going to talk through the details of them here. The staircases are the same. Some of the doors are the same. Even the sign on the lab where I used to be 303 is still, the plate 303 is still the same as it was 30 years ago. But a lot has changed. I think I would be totally lost if I was left on my terms going through the department. I think I did walk around campus last night. I came around 8, and everything just came right back. I used to live on 127 Gower Street. It's still there. I lived in Schaefer House. It's still there. I stayed a year in Connaught Hall, a few streets down, and it's still there. So some things have changed a lot, and some things are still the same, and that's amazing. So when I was a teenager, I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I used to think of oil industry and refineries as where all the chemical engineers went, and hard hats and steel toe boots, right? Since then, so from that beginning to when I graduated to the last 25 years, you find chemical engineers everywhere in all the hot areas of science these days: nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, biotechnology. We are everywhere. Energy. So I think the sky is the limit with the type of training we get. Chemical engineering training tends to be very diverse, very, very broad. And some of the basic principles that we learn during the curriculum are broadly applicable and can be leveraged across many, many industrial sectors. And I think engineers just need to be brave and move into the space that seems to afford them the best opportunity to make an impact. When I got into pharmaceuticals, I had no intentions of doing that. I used to think Procter and Gamble and Unilever and Shell and Exxon. So it was a bit of a jump into the unknown for me as well, and it has worked out just fantastic. I have had the privilege of working on 2 drugs that have, in our business, oftentimes we don't get to cure anything. We get to, we come up with therapies that help manage the symptoms. There are 2 drugs that I worked on where we actually made so much more of an impact than just treating the symptoms. One is for HCV. I worked on HCV drugs for a period of 7 years, and through 2 rounds of molecules that eventually got commercialized, we are literally curing Hep C right now, and that is an amazing experience and a privilege in a way to be part of that program. And then the other one that I'm extremely proud of are the drugs for hematological cancers. So when I was young, if someone had blood cancer, it was extremely difficult because you cannot treat it with radiations. There are no solid tumor there to try and disintegrate. So we worked on a program which essentially, where the basic biology is, we trigger the gene that is responsible for cell death in the cancer cells. Cancer cells don't die like normal cells do. So it's a very beautiful, intricate bit of biology to literally just trigger a gene on in a cancer cell. And with that, these patients are disease-free in 6 months' time, and they live normal lives. So having the opportunity to work on this Hep C drug and the cancer drug for blood cancers has been the privilege of my life. I have this quote on my slide later in the day. Think like an engineer, execute like a scientist. That's kind of what I do all the time. But we cannot start in the weeds and then get out of them. We have to start at a high level and then get into the details. So that's a skill that as an engineer I use. I have to admit, I joke in the US that I take the engineer's salary, but in 26 years, I've never really actually worked as an engineer. I've mostly worked as a scientist and a manager, but some of these fundamental skills, I use them daily. I think be brave and stay focused on making an impact. We don't have to choose traditional pathways that people before us might have done. And if you have a growth mindset and if you are curious, chemical engineers, for them, sky is the limit.